Welcome to Inspiring Women in Audit, the only podcast celebrating the achievements and journeys of women in the internal audit industry. In each episode, we spotlight the extraordinary stories, insights, and expertise of these dynamic professionals. Our aim is to amplify their voices, inspiring a new generation of women auditors to share their knowledge, experiences, and unique perspectives. Remember to check our show notes for links to our social media channels and to subscribe to the Inspiring Women in Audit newsletter. This podcast is brought to you by I4 Global Results Limited, the audit communication experts, dedicated to transforming your audit reporting and your audit results through communication, optimization, and collaboration. Now, let's dive into this episode of Inspiring Women in Audit.
Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the Inspiring Women in Audit podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Kara Falco, Chief Audit Executive at CAEs in the United States. Kara has over 20 years of audit experience spanning the telecom and retail industries and worked her way from senior internal auditor to leading the audit function at a Fortune 500 company. She's built a team that business partners now come to voluntarily, and most of us know in internal audit, that is no small thing. So, Kara, welcome to the Inspiring Women in Audit podcast.
Well, Tracy, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be on your podcast. So just really looking forward to our conversation today.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it too. So one of the questions I ask most of my guests is like, how did you get into internal audit? Some of us stumble into it. Some of us are dropped into it. What's your kind of audit origin story?
So for internal audit, I kind of just stumbled into it. I worked at MCI WorldCom Verizon in operational audits for over 20 years. And our roles, we went through a finance transformation, and our roles in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, were moving to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And, so we grew up with SOX, right? And our team at Verizon was all about continuous improvement, how to be more efficient, how to be more effective, cover a broader scope in our operational audits. And so when our roles moved to Tulsa, my family decided that they really didn't want to leave Iowa. And so I opened up my job search and applied for a senior internal auditor role at CAEs. At the time, I was a senior manager at Verizon, so was really looking at taking a step back to get into a different, just a different lens of what audit looked like. And I was really fortunate because I was called for an interview. And so this was in Des Moines, which was a few hours away from where we lived, and came in for an interview. And the CAE at that time had just been brought on to stand up internal audit at CAEs. And he actually was hired from the Cedar Rapids area. We knew a lot of the same people, and we really just clicked. And Eric had a 5-year plan for internal audit, and really that was starting it, with 3 people, and then continuing to build it, looking at expanding and bringing on managers and bringing on additional auditors. And so I think that when Eric and I met and we just clicked, he saw my continuous improvement background. He saw my SOX experience. And I think he was just really looking at, okay, I'll bring her on as an individual contributor with the thought in mind that I want to take her back into the management role here at some point when the time is right. So really it was, that first year as an individual contributor, it was all about learning what does internal audit do besides SOX? What are the standards? What are the rules and responsibilities that, we have to live by, and code that we have to adhere to?
That's an amazing story. And it's interesting how you had an instant connection because you're from the same area. And, I talk a lot about this with the internal audit teams that I work with is the relationships are everything. I mean, they're gold, right? So, there are things that create that instant rapport. When I travel the world and I say I'm from Canada, people light up because they're like, "Oh, I've always wanted to go to Canada," and it's just instant conversation. So I love that that's something that contributed to you getting the job and then to your success overall. But I'm wondering, what actually, for our listeners, is the difference between operational audit and internal audit?
So I think the hardest transition for me, Tracy, was, in operational audit, our team was constantly looking for how we could be more effective, how we could be more efficient. What could we do to automate so that we could cover more ground? Stepping into internal audit, our role was as an advisor and as where do the business teams have opportunity. So the hardest piece for me was not being able to step in and start making those changes, relying upon negotiation and building a business case to make the business community embrace our recommendations.
So it's no you weren't allowed to implement anymore, basically. You
Right.
could see, you could have the vision, but then you had to work with others, collaborate with others in order to get that vision realized and hope that they do it the way that you see is a great way to do it.
Right. And I think that from an internal audit perspective, we always come up with, these ideas that are, grand, and really sitting down with the business and understanding, okay, is this feasible? Can we accomplish this? Is it able to be done? So I think that's been a big part of our team's journey over the years, is making sure that when we're coming forward with recommendations, that they can be achieved, they are feasible, that it's not just this pie in the sky idea that sounds great, but it's not possible.
And I just hear a lot of great language from you. I mean, I focus on language because of what I do for a living, and you're saying a lot of great things about like working with the business, making sure it's feasible. It's not just like coming up with our recommendations, dropping them in a report, sending it off, and then saying, "Okay, well, we'll see what they come up with for an action plan." Right? It sounds more collaborative and more kind of a shared vision, if I can say that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I would completely agree. I think we've definitely moved in that direction over the years. I certainly don't want our team to bring forward a recommendation in a final report that is going to leaders that our business partners are are going to come and say, "That's not possible." I think it's all about the message and what are we able to accomplish, and how do we start making just those baby steps. We don't have to go from 0 to 100 immediately. To me, it's about continuous improvement, and what can we do this year, and to make improvements, and what can we do going forward just to continue maturing our organization.
That's brilliant. I love that. So your predecessor had a 5-year plan, and it must have been a very exciting time to actually build up an entire audit function. And then you stepped into the interim CAE role. Were there changes that you recognized that you wanted to make out of the gate? I'm wondering because you were part of that 5-year process. So then when you stepped into the role, what were you thinking? Did you have changes right away that you wanted to make? Did you put a strategy in place?
Definitely that first year as interim CAE was probably one of the most difficult periods in my professional career, because I was doing the job, but I it wasn't permanent at that point. And so when I stepped into the role, the one thing that was the most important to me was building relationships with the business. and really making sure that they saw us as a trusted advisor, as someone who wanted to partner with them to make improvements, not someone coming in who we weren't the subject matter experts. We we weren't in the trenches day in and day out. And so I didn't want people to think that we were trying to tell them how to do their jobs. They know how to do their jobs. Um, I wanted to make sure it was collaborative. And so to me, that was the biggest change that I made, was making sure that we weren't seen as the police and being collaborative business partners.
I think that's one of the hardest shifts to make, to be honest. I hear it a lot from the clients that I work with, and some of them really struggle. Some of the clients are like they have a 150-year history, and it's just so hard to overcome that history. It's like the memory goes into the limbic system of people of what internal audit does and is supposed to do, and how they behave, even if they don't do that anymore. So can you talk a little bit about how you, I guess, got them from that position of thinking more police-like into more trusted advisor perspective?
Y- Yeah, a lot of it was just the relationship building, right? And meeting with the leaders on a regular basis, talking with them about what our internal audit plan looked like and what we wanted to accomplish as a team. A lot of it was also um, going into spaces not always invited, but looking at things from an advisory perspective and then coming forward with just suggestions, recommendations. Okay, here's maybe things that we can do differently to be more effective, more
Mhm.
efficient. And as we continued to do that, I think word got out that that we weren't coming in and talking about deficiencies, talking about you're not doing this right. It was more about where do we have opportunities? Where do we have, you know, where can we improve, be more effective, automate? And so to me, it was really all about the message and the communication and just learning in that first year how important the message is. And by choosing our words a little bit differently, the message completely changed.
That's amazing. It sounds to me, I'm interpreting, you have to tell me if I'm off base or not, that your team is number 1 on board with this, number 2 has really excellent communication skills, and number 3, I'm guessing, is probably not, like, limited in terms of who they can talk to, because sometimes when I talk to audit teams, they're like, "This level talks to this level in the business, and this level talks to this level in the business." So how does it work for your team in communication with the business?
So, I have to say that so Casey's is Fortune 500. We have grown tremendously over the years. And the great thing about Casey's is that we still operate like we're that mom and pop retail convenience store. And so it's nothing for our team members at Casey's, whether it's internal audit or any other function, to walk through the halls and have conversations with our chiefs and our other senior leaders. So my team regularly communicates with directors, VPs, SVPs, and even the chiefs. Open lines of communications when we have our exit meetings and our entrance meetings. Many times those leaders are sitting in those discussions. My team meets quarterly with our CFO just to walk through the projects that we've looked at through the quarter and to address questions and just clarifications that he has. We met with him yesterday over Q3. And, at the end, he said, I always feel like I walk away from these meetings learning something new about the business. So I just keeping those lines of communication open, and we all just treat each other like we want to be treated, and that's top down here at Casey's.
That sounds like an amazing corporate culture to work in. Do you want to just take a moment and tell everybody what Casey's does?
So Casey's is a convenience store chain. We started out, like I said, small mom and pop shop. We have grown to almost 3,000 stores across 19 states. Um, we are a $23 billion company. So just a wonderful message of how a company can go from a small beginning to where we are today. Great leadership. Almost our entire leadership team has turned over in the last 7 years. So Darren Rebellas came on as our CEO and president about 7 years ago, and our journey since then, it has been amazing, and we've really focused on using not just intuition and gut, but data to drive where we go. So very, of course, it's kind of a three-legged stool, if you will. We have fuel, we have a huge prepared food business, and then our inside store. Casey's, I believe, is number 5 in pizza sales across the United States.
I had no idea. I
Yes,
had
we
no
make
idea.
a mean breakfast pizza.
Do you? All right. So I need to head back into the States and give it a go.
Yeah, you could come to Minnesota. We're
Oh,
in
I'd be
Minnesota.
happy to. I'd be happy to. So let's come back to your team. We had a short call just to get to know each other before we jumped on the podcast. And you talked about your team having the freedom to chase something when they think there might be an opportunity, even without clear evidence. So, number one, I love the language of the freedom when there might be an opportunity, even without clear evidence. So, what drives that kind of management style, and how does the team work with it?
Tracy, I think a lot of that is really just empowering our team to grow and develop. And I've been in management for over 20 years, and I've always said that a leader is only as good as the team that they build. And so making sure that people feel like they've got those opportunities, and as long as one, it's not impeding our annual plan, because as all of us, we have a job to do. We've communicated that plan to the audit committee, and we've said this is what we're going to accomplish this year. So as long as it's not getting in the way of that, as long as we're not impeding business,
Mhm.
then I I like for the team to have those opportunities. It gives us more knowledge about the business and how it works, and it gives us an opportunity to collaborate with the business in a non-assurance type of environment, to where we're not coming out and saying, okay, we have these observations. We'd like an action plan. This is more about um, what can we be doing differently to improve operations, and where can we automate and just be more efficient and effective. So I look at it, as long as it's not impeding what we've committed to, as long as we're not getting in the way of business, um, operating on a daily basis, we'll step back after that first initial um, dive into something and say, okay, what have we learned so far? Do we think there could be something there? And if so, then we'll sit down with the business, have that discussion. Do you mind if we keep going? Here's what we've learned so far. Here's where we think we might be able to add value. And as long as we're both in agreement, then we keep going.
Does it create any challenges at all in what you're doing, or is it just really just a good positive? experience and opportunity for everyone.
I think it's a good positive experience for everyone. You know, it also gives the team something else to focus on when, maybe we're in the middle of an assurance audit and we're waiting for information from the business in order to move forward. It gives the team something to pivot to so
Yeah.
that we're making efficient use of our time as well.
And do you think this kind of imperative to do these kinds of things comes from your operational audit background?
Yes, I would say so. And I also think that, I mean, the team is really enthused by it, right? And they're passionate about it. So it's not just me. It's my management team. It's everyone, on the team that engages in these types of initiatives.
I did a post on LinkedIn a few weeks ago called Joy, I think it was like Joy equals audit or something. And it just I feel that from you. I feel that from the way you speak and the way you smile and the presence that you have is there's I think leans a lot more into the joy side than to the stressed in audit side. And I think that's a wonderful thing because there are a lot of audit teams in the last 5 years that have faced a lot of struggles, right? Having to work from home and manage the kids not being in school. And there's just been a lot of stress. And I've never known an auditor who isn't busy, right? They don't sit at their desks and play computer games. There's always something to do. So I think it's from my perspective, at least as a trainer and a coach, it's important that our teams are happy and fulfilled and do find satisfaction in the work they do. And I just kind of feel that radiating off the screen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, no, I completely agree. And I think that the other thing that we consider here and something I learned from my predecessor, we don't want everyone to be career internal auditors at Casey's. We've built, I think, over the years, a really strong pipeline back into the business. And so gaining those skills and those attributes that have made us successful as an auditor, putting those out in the business because that's only going to help our team moving forward. Knowing what internal audit is going to be looking for and what controls really are and the difference between okay, what's considered SOX and what's considered operational and just that continuous improvement mindset. So I think that's another thing that we've done really well at Casey's, starting with my predecessor, is building that pipeline and moving our people, if they want to, back out into the business so that they can teach others what they've learned in internal audit.
I think that's so important. I love talent rotation as a concept for internal audit. When I went into internal audit, I mean, it was some time ago, and you had to work for one of the big firms before you could go into internal audit. You had to have your designation. So for us in Canada, it was chartered accountancy. It's now CPA, chartered professional accountant, but it's more like the States there. But today it's a whole different ballgame. You can bring people from the business into audit because they have all that expertise and knowledge, or you can take people from audit and put them back into the business because they're sharing. Well, I just think audit gets into our DNA, right? So you take those principles of what is efficient or what makes a good control on or what is a risk and understanding risk tolerance. You take all that back into the business with you.
Yeah, we stood up a finance rotation program at Casey's about 2 years ago. And generally speaking, internal audit is a required rotation. And we have had such great success with the program. These kids coming out of college today, they're they're young, they're hungry, they're motivated, and they are so much more technically advanced than I am. So I've definitely learned from them and appreciate their knowledge and expertise in that area.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to bring in um like interns or students, even working students and things, because they just bring such a different perspective than those of us in the latter half of our careers have, and the new
Agreed.
tools and things, and a level of excitement and energy that just reinvigorates the whole team. So I think that's great.
Completely agree.
Yeah. I wanted to come back to this shift that you've had from assurance to assurance and advisory. So we talked a little bit about it, but I can hear some people saying that there's an independence issue, and how do you handle that? I have there's a particular client that comes to mind where they're like, we do not do consulting, we do not do advisory work, um, because of that perception. So how do you see it, and how do you manage it?
When and I've communicated this to the audit committee in the past. I I look at our assurance initiatives and I say there's always going to be some type of advisory perspective to those.
Mhm.
And when you look at our plan, there's a considerable amount of initiatives in our plan that are tied to our top ERM risk. That's something that we've committed to the committee that we are going to continue to focus on, and we do. A
Mhm.
a lot of the advisory initiatives that we look at are sometimes related to areas that might not ever even make it onto our plan because they don't meet that level of it's a top ERM risk, it's a technology change, it's compliance related. So just making sure that we're always thinking about who do we have working on these advisory initiatives? And if in the future we should come back in and take a look at that area, making sure that we've kept those segregations in place and that a person who looked at it from an advisory perspective isn't sitting on the assurance initiative. Um, but making sure that we're looking at it independently, we're providing recommendations, we're building that business case as for why it makes sense to move down a continuous improvement path, but never stepping over and performing work on their behalf. There have been areas. So we stood up continuous monitoring and auditing several years ago. It was something John Tabor on my team, who's a manager, was very passionate about and drove from the time that he started at Casey's. And so a few of those areas we've looked at, we've built, we've tweaked, and then we've moved those back into the business.
Nice. Because that's really where it should be, right? One could
Right.
argue that that's really where it should be. It's not audit that should be doing the continuous monitoring, it's the business that should be doing it. That's
Correct.
brilliant. So I'd like to turn to you now and ask about you as a leader. What do you think your strongest characteristics are, and where did those come from?
I think my strongest characteristics are those of being collaborative, being supportive, and compassionate. So, all of us have a story, right? Everything that has happened in our past has led us to where we are today. And I have a story. I have a very, very strong family support system. I was 17 years old when I got pregnant. And I've always said that I would not be where I am today had it not been for my family and specifically my dad. And, my dad was my strongest supporter, I think, when I made the decision to become a single mom at 18 years old. My son's biological father was killed when I was pregnant. And so, I did it with the support of my family. Went to school. My parents supported me throughout that entire 4 years, and I've always wanted to live my life the way that's going to make my family proud. Um, my dad had serious health conditions and 3 years ago underwent a very complicated heart procedure. had a stroke, and for the 2 years that he lived after that, he could not care for himself. But through the whole time, my dad was gracious, he was appreciative, and he never lost his sense of humor. And that's the type of person that I want to be. And, when I think about what people see of me and how I want to be known, of course, I want to be known for the team that we've stood up and built and for the value that we add. But I also want to be known for being gracious and appreciative and, you know, always wanting to do as much as I can for others, just like what I've had from the people that have really influenced and inspired me through my career.
That's quite the story. This is the third time recording a podcast that I've had tears come to my eyes. So, it's a true story of resilience to me. Um, when you have a child at 18, there are a lot of societal expectations on the direction that that's going to go, and it's not usually upward, right? And so to have the family support that you've had is truly incredible. Your dad sounds like an incredible human being.
He
And
was.
yeah, and supported you to get to this journey where you are gracious and you are supportive and you are collaborative. And I think, I think you're living those things that you said. And that's a huge accomplishment. So let if you had to give a piece of advice to someone who may be struggling, who has that dream for the career or they might want to start their own business, whatever it is, like what would you say to them?
I would say lean on your support system, whether it be family, friends, coworkers.
Mhm.
We're all here to support one another. And, when something happens at work and our team members have to be out, we always say family first, take care of yourself, take care of your family, because that's what's going to make you successful at work.
And I think too, because I know like relying on your family, sometimes you don't have family or either at all, or they're just not around you. I spent a lot of years out of the country and I was on my own for all intents and purposes. So it's your chosen family too, I think,
Exactly. Yep.
that that can get you through it and finding people to have your back or to rely on for some things is just super important. And it's a key to your success. I realized it's probably about 10 years ago, and I realized one of the driving factors of my success is that and I didn't recognize it for all the years because I left home. I mean, I went away to university, came back in the summers. Then I moved to Toronto and started the whole audit career. And I remember leaving for Toronto to work on our Wall Street, which is Bay Street, for one of the big firms. And I said to my mom, I'll be back in 2 years. And it was way more, it was decades, right? But I think the foundation of my success is my mother said, you can always come home. Like no questions asked. And I didn't process it, I think, till about 10 years ago where I could do anything I wanted. I could be anywhere in the world. I could go after any dream because my mother said, "You can always come home."
Yeah. And that's the just the great thing about having a supportive family and a supportive network. And I've been blessed with
Yeah.
both really. So that's I feel what has really made me who I am today.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel the same way. I am also very blessed, and I'm very grateful for all of the people in my life. So, On that note, we will turn to something a little more a little more work related. Are you happy with where your team is on their AI journey? Because we can talk about auditing AI in the business, or we can talk about using AI as a tool for the audit team. Do you feel like you're going too slow, or are you ahead of the pack, or how is that journey?
I'm very excited and happy about where our team is today. So I meet with all of the CAEs in the greater Des Moines metro area on a quarterly basis, and we had our meeting yesterday, and AI was the topic of discussion. And so having those brainstorming discussions about how teams are using it and what they're doing, I really walked away from that meeting yesterday feeling like, wow, our team has really embraced AI. Had a discussion with my boss earlier this week, our CFO, and he said our IT team pulled AI utilization report last week and provided it to the chiefs, and he goes, "Your team was by far the highest user of AI at our company."
Wow.
And I I just said, "Wow, we have really embraced it." And the team is really looking for where do we have opportunities and what can we do within our process to be more efficient so that it allows us more time to focus on assurance and advisory initiatives, those top ERM risk, looking at more compliance related areas, which we've done a little in the past, but for our upcoming audit plan, we've included several more compliance initiatives just because we've taken the time to embrace technology.
Do you find it's a real time saver? Do you have any numbers on that?
I do. So we are looking at partnering with a startup company right now to automate about 85 or 90% of our IT control SOX testing. And so that would be 800 hours at a minimum for our team. That doesn't include the time savings out in the business because they're not having to pull populations for us or pulling evidence for us because this agent has the ability to do all of that. So, I think about that. I had one team member here just in the last month who created an agent to build out a risk and planning memo, an audit program, um, the work papers that we're going to use for a smaller initiative just to test it out and
Right.
see how does it work.
That's amazing. I mean, I think, you're far ahead of a lot of audit shops in terms of where they are with AI. Because I hear horror stories still of they're not even allowed to have full Copilot licenses yet, you know?
Yeah, we all of our seniors and above have the full Copilot,
Mhm.
and I'm hoping that with the utilization report and a subset of our team having access and still being the highest users, I'm hoping that we'll get some additional licenses.
That's amazing. No, I think it's super progress. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. We're excited about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Casey's a little bit more because their purpose statement, which is from my research, but the purpose statement is to make life better for communities and guests every day, which is an amazing purpose statement. So I think it goes to a little bit about what we were talking about before, but how does that filter down into the way your team operates and how does it shape how success looks for everyone?
When we start thinking about our annual plan, we always go back to our 3-year strategic plan, which includes improving the guest experience, improving just the overall food quality, and the food offerings. So we're always aligning with that strategic plan, and the initiatives that we include really showcase that. Where do we have opportunities to continuous improvement, whether that be in our stores or whether that be at our 3 distribution centers or at corporate headquarters? What does success look like for us? I think I would say that if our team is known as a trusted advisor, as a business partner, a collaborator, what have we done and has it added value to the business? Then if we can say yes to those, we're successful.
It makes me wonder, do you have a way of measuring?
So, metrics is something that we continue to work on. We do send out surveys after every initiative just to gauge our stakeholders, what went well, what could we have done differently, and where do we have opportunities as a team to grow. So we look at that, we measure that, something that we report out to the committee on how well we're doing. We do have a plan in place just to make sure that we're adhering to those the standards, and are we doing what we need to be doing. But I also think a lot of it just comes in the relationships that we've built. And now when we have people that are coming to us asking to partner with us, that's success.
That
And
was exactly my thought when you were speaking. It's like if they're coming to you, that's a huge measure of success.
yeah, yeah. And I think metrics is something that we can always continue to work on. But, then I also look at talent retention, and also that pipeline that we talked about. And we don't want every person to stay in internal audit. So to me, a measure of success as well is that we have people that are going out into the business, and they're taking those roles, and that continuous improvement mindset that we've learned in internal audit out to the business.
Fair enough. Sounds very good. Now, if a woman in internal audit today is about to step into her first CAE role, what's the one thing you would want her to know going into it?
The one thing I would want them to know, that's a great question. I would say it is all about building relationships. It is building a relationship with your audit committee, having that continuous cycle of discussion, learning from their experiences, um, the relationship with the leaders at your company, with your team members, and with your business partners. And one of the things that I've talked with our CFO about is that since becoming involved in internal audit and having the opportunity to sit in audit committee meetings, I have learned so much from not just our audit committee, but our leaders that are sitting in those meetings. The questions that they're asking, the insight that they're bringing to the business, and really just taking all of that in and bringing it back to our team. I also think that we all make mistakes. We're human, and I have made mistakes in my time as CAE, and I always try and learn from those mistakes. And I always say, I can't promise I'm not going to make mistakes, but I can promise you that I'm going to try and never make the same mistake. And being transparent about those mistakes with the team, I think, is huge, because it helps them understand that it's okay to make mistakes. It's going to happen. But as long as we're learning from that and we're taking something away from it, that to me, that's growth. And that's where the opportunity really is for not just our team, but for all of us.
I love that philosophy. A lot of people say, if you fail, try again. And I would just like to take the F word out of our vocabularies because I don't think about failing. I think about, well, I tried something. The outcome wasn't what I wanted. Maybe it was a quote unquote mistake. Uh, but I'm going to try again and I'm going to do better. I'm going to get closer or I'm going to get the outcome that I'm looking for. And I hope our teams have that mindset because we don't feel good about ourselves if we fail, right? So, but owning our mistakes and then learning from them and moving on from them and doing even better, I think is just hugely important. As a human being, I don't know. It's that whole mindset, right?
Yeah, and I have to say, I think that I am probably the hardest on myself, and and many times I probably make something so much more than what it really is. S
In your mind?
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
definitely, definitely. Um, but just being aware of that and being transparent and learning, as I go, I think has been really crucial to my development as a CAE, as as a leader, as a friend, as a family member. So, so many aspects of what I've learned in this role have gone even outside of what I do at Casey's.
Absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And the things that I have learned as a trainer and as a coach and building a business, I take those to the other relationships that I have outside because it you learn as a whole being, right? And yeah. So I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. I'm getting this, cool vibe that we're on the same we're on the same wavelength with a lot of this stuff. All right, as we bring the podcast to a close, given your career so far, what do you want your legacy at Casey's to be specifically, or maybe in the industry? Have you got thoughts on that?
So, of course, at Casey's, in internal audit, you want everyone to remember you as, helping build an effective and efficient team, adding value. Outside of that, I really want to be known for the relationships I've built and the partnerships, the collaboration, and that, you know, bringing internal audit to a completely different level of how people view us. And, we're not the police. We're not here to tell you how to do your jobs because we're not the experts. You are. But where do we have opportunities? So I would say that that's to me probably the biggest thing.
That's amazing. I'm just writing down the word opportunities because it just keeps coming back over and over in our conversation.
It
Carol, I want to
does.
thank you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure, and we'll see you again.
All right. Well, Tracy, thank you so much for having me. And I've enjoyed getting to know you. And I completely agree. Some people you meet and you just vibe with. And we certainly hit it off from the first call. So thank you so much. And I look forward to just becoming a part of your family.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carol.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Inspiring Women in Audit podcast. We'd love for you to stay part of our growing community, so subscribe wherever you're listening. If you're enjoying our content on platforms like iTunes or Spotify, a quick 5-star rating from you would mean the world to us. It's a small action that supports our mission immensely. Don't forget to explore the show notes for various links and join our vibrant community on all our social media platforms. Your interaction and support play a crucial role in amplifying the voices of inspiring women in audit and spreading their inspiring stories even further. Thank you for being a part of our journey, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the Inspiring Women in Audit podcast.